Six podcast. This is your host for this and every week from now on, Tony. I'm accompanied by three wonderful guests this week, and we're just trying them out. We may, switch them out if things don't work out so hot, but why don't you guys introduce yourselves? How about Connor? How about you introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Connor. Where we go one, we go all. Sorry, I was just trying to sabotage the opening. I'm not a QAnon guy.
I edit these, so you.
Okay.
I got all the power. Anthony, go ahead.
All right, replacing Devin Faraci this week is Anthony Gomez.
Kirk?
My name's Kirk. I'm here conditionally. Tony has required that I meet him in his office. He has a black leather couch against a white wall, and there may or may not be a couple cameras in the room. Anyways, I'm a little nervous.
Well, Kirk, we can talk about that after the episode. But this week we're discussing a 2016 film by Trey Edward Shults called Krisha, which is a film he described as a family drama film, like a horror movie, as opposed to his next film, It Comes at Night, which is a horror movie filmed like a family drama, if you've seen that one. And before I get into what I think of this quite discussable and interesting film, I want to hear from my co-hosts about what their reactions were. I think I'm going to start with Kirk this time.
Hey, there you go. I'm honored. So, yes, I chose this movie in the sense that I selected it from a group of three last week. And I quite enjoyed it. I've since watched it again. So I've watched this movie twice. It is very captivating. What I look for in a movie, like people have said, Tony, I think, has so incisively said about me, is I look for dynamics where people are allowed to express emotions in difficult situations and how that interacts. And they're almost allowed to break the norms of traditional conversation and mannerisms. Like we kind of stretch that rubber band where people might break and how it clashes with what we expect them to present as. And in this movie, we have Krisha, who is some form of recovering addict. It's not exactly clear. It's quite ambiguous. I would also say that she probably is suffering from some sort of personality disorder, most likely borderline personality disorder, just based on her impulsivity and the way she kind of splits. Splitting is a mechanism whereby we only see the worst or the best in people, and we react in a volatile manner when confronted with aspects of people we don't like, including ourselves. So Krisha, she's at this family reunion. She's been estranged from her family, and I think it just from the very first scene, we're brought into this very mimetic, naturalistic setting. The family interactions all feel genuine, and they feel so painstaking and gross to me. And I don't know why I'm saying that. I guess I have some experience with kind of the dread that attends the incessant banality of family gatherings, and almost it's like an existential dread. Like, is this it? This is my clan, and how are we connected? And it's so arbitrary, and it feels so forced at times, and you don't know where you fit in, and you don't know how you fit in. And I think Krisha was relating to all of that, on top of the fact that she was seeing her estranged son for the first time in quite a while, who was played by Trey Edward Shults, the director. Right. And it really sets the film up for some poignant moments, some harrowing moments. Almost, I wouldn't use the word, I may have cringed at times, but I think that's a disservice to the movie to say, like, it was cringeworthy at times. I think it was.
Well, it could be cringe intentionally, right? I mean,
yeah, but
yeah,
but that seems almost like too formulaic or too basic, reductive of a description. It was cringeworthy in the sense that it was so real to my experience, to my depiction, my internal perspective of family gatherings and the role of the extended family, that it really struck me. And so I think he did an excellent job. You could really tell this was a family affair. Trey Edward Shults' aunt played Krisha, and the two sisters were also Krisha's sisters in real life. I think that kind of shone through. I think that one of the standout characters was Robin, or Bobby, who was her kind of caretaker who turns on her towards the end, guardian. I think I'm rambling now, but I really do. I'm so effusive because I really love this movie, and I'm glad Tony brought it to us. So someone else go ahead.
All right. Connor, I know you've seen it before, but what did you think?
Sure. This is my second time watching it, as you said. And yeah, kind of words fail me with this movie. It was so incredibly, again, I don't want to resort to kind of my usual cliches. It was gripping. It was engrossing. I was just completely wrapped, especially this time through. Obviously, first time I watched it, I was struck by a few things, right? First idea I think would be just kind of verisimilitude, just somehow capturing this exact feeling of being at a family gathering. Even if the details, you haven't necessarily experienced the details, just the whole feels so real. Just the kind of, all of the aunts in the kitchen kind of planning to do the turkey, and then all of the guys kind of,
oh my God, the boys, the Tim and Eric boys who are grunting and wrestling naked and yelling. Oh, that's like my favorite detail. Anyway,
and just get-togethers of one, of an older person trying to get a younger person to fix their computer.
Yeah,
love it. All of these things, right? These details struck me for creating this incredibly realistic texture, which I would have said, right, like engrossed me. It made me feel for Krisha. It made me feel the tension of this moment. I mean, now watching it a second time, I admire it much more as a story that's being told. I admired much more the beats, the way we're introduced to Krisha. And here I felt it very deeply as just a pure tragedy, as a pure spectacle, as a sort of magnet for pathos and feeling and sadness. And I felt completely engrossed in it and very moved by it, and strongly almost identifying with Krisha in a way, I think, until the very end, but I can discuss that later. Yeah, I'm floored by this movie. I just think it just accomplishes everything it sets out to do. It's just incredible.
So, Anthony, now's your time. Tell us why we're wrong. Why are we wrong to like this movie?
Yeah, well, you're all horrible people. It's a racist movie.
Okay. Dang
no,
it.
I think
got me again.
I think after hearing Connor and Kirk, the thing about this movie, and I'll come out and say, is it didn't work for me fully. I could admire it in places, and I could admire technicalities of it. But hearing Connor and Kirk talk about it, I think it's one of those movies where so much of its power and importance and sort of influence ultimately depends on how you relate to the images and depictions of the family itself.
Sure.
Particularly the extended family and the portrayal of like Thanksgiving in the movie, which is sort of a culturally like familiar thing that like I just have no relevant like connection with. At times, like I could see the family, I could see pieces maybe of my own cousins and whatever there, but they ultimately don't relate back to me in the way they seem to relate for Kirk and Connor, and I'm guessing you, Tony. So like on a whole, those parts kind of fall flat for me because I have to kind of work in bringing myself to it in a way that is a bit different than the rest of the group here. I think the way Kirk talked about last week, what do we do when we encounter with a movie that's obviously probably not meant for us and that requires a bit of work, is the way I kind of felt here. I was constantly working to find where I would fit in with this sort of family, which all came out with dynamics that I just don't recognize in the way my own celebrations were back home, which is sort of a hard thing to think about. But at other times, to ignore that and to think about the movie on its own, I think like certain elements and choices, like the sound design was excellent. And I really admired the way the sound brought a sort of claustrophobia at times, particularly to Krisha when she goes to the bathroom and locks and you hear the muted sounds of people gathering outside was pretty good. At other times, though, I didn't like Trey Edward Shults' acting in the movie. I think if you're familiar and you could relate to that, it kind of works. But for me, it just comes off as like amateurish, particularly when he's like, what if I like business management? Like, I'm just like, whatever. Like, I honestly could just be like, get this conversation over with for me. So on a whole, like, there's just a lot of things I kind of like see and I can understand who this kind of affects and how this kind of relates to certain people, but ultimately it's just like not for me.
Really? Okay. Wow. I mean, I knew this, but I'm surprised.
Yeah.
I don't know what happens.
Yeah, we'll go to the Twitter poll. And
I mean, yeah, I mean, this is a movie that I think is almost tailor-made for this podcast and tailor-made for me and my personality and what I look for in movies, because everything that's great about it is like right there on the surface. Like there's not a whole lot of digging. You can dig. I think there's stuff in there that's buried, but you don't really have to. It's all right there. It's just apparent for your eyes and ears. This movie is just, for one thing, it's a tragedy on one level, obviously, because in the kind of the classical sense in which it follows a character who damns themselves through choices that they make, and yet we empathize with them every step of the way. We don't, I mean, at least maybe I can't speak for everyone, but I don't judge Krisha. I don't hate Krisha. Mm-hmm. Maybe I'm frustrated and stressed out by some of the choices she makes, but I understand her. I feel like I know her because I've been in her head. And when she makes her final tragic choice, because we've been following her for these 80 minutes, it feels correct. And it's painful, but it's correct. And that's, to me, is the essence of tragedy. But it's also a movie about family and about these family gatherings. And I think this is a movie that really nails this very particular feeling in a family gathering where things are very banal, they're very polite, there's just people are talking and having fun, and there's turkey, but there's always an undercurrent of something, you know, and it's different in every family, but there's always context. There's always things you know about each other, things that maybe you're not supposed to say, and that informs how you respond to those situations. And I think that this movie is directed so sensitively, so perceptively. I think the directing in this movie is utterly masterful, which is easy to say about a movie as showy as this one, because it is a very showy movie. He's making a lot of loud, bright, and colorful choices. At times it feels almost film schoolish, and yet he's eager to kind of show off his stuff. He's eager to show off his chops. Not the first shot, but the second shot of the movie where she arrives at the house is this like 3-minute long like oneer. You know, it's a very kind of the young man's gesture of like formal mastery, of like, look what I got, Mom, look what I can do. And so it's easy to point to those aspects of the movie and say, oh wow, that's impressive. But I think that there's more to it than that. It doesn't feel empty. Every choice he makes serves to put us in the head of Krisha. And there's a lot of just amazing little touches. I mean, first of all, as far as the camera work and the cinematography, the camera wanders. It kind of ambles around. It follows people. It peers around corners. And it almost feels like it's its own character. It's just walking around. It's following these people, and it's observing. What this movie establishes from the very beginning is that Krisha is an outsider. She is observing these people. She's not participating in their lives. And the camera plays into this by just observing these little moments. We get these little glimpses into all these people's lives, these little stories. This movie excels almost better than any movie I've ever seen at depicting characters who have a life outside of the movie. I believe that these are real people who, when the movie ends, their lives will continue. You know, we're just getting a little glimpse of their lives in the same way that Krisha is only getting a little glimpse of their lives. She has to grapple with the fact that she doesn't really know who these people are, including her own son, which is tremendously painful. And all the choices she makes throughout this movie are her trying to deal with that fundamental pain and trying to manage that and react to it and try to make the pain go away. If I had to ascribe a single flaw to Krisha, which is tough because she's a very flawed person, it's that she wants to just make the pain go away, and she wants to just get there now. She doesn't want to do the work to make that happen. She doesn't want to like empathize with other people and try to understand. She just wants to feel good and have people like her. You know, like the rather disturbing scene where she wants her dog to comfort her, and the dog's not quite doing it right, so she shakes the dog's head. And it's kind of disturbing, but that illustrates kind of what her problem is and why she has so many issues dealing with people. This movie is so dense with just little moments. It's a very short movie, but it's incredibly dense because every scene has a detail or a touch, just like things like the conversation between, I don't remember the names, but the young couple, and they're talking about when he wakes up and he has an erection and he tries to get his wife to have sex with him. And it's this very fun, very real conversation that takes like 30 seconds of screen time, but it tells a whole story about these people. And it's full of things like that. And then you have stuff like when she drops the turkey, and one of my favorite scenes ever, and you immediately hear the uncle's demonic cackling is the only way I can describe it. I mean, I can talk about this movie for like 45 minutes. I mean, there's
that
just
uncle, man. Do we know the uncle's name?
I'll look him up. He's astonishing.
He was actually the only professional actor in the movie.
Is that true? Really? I believe it because he's given the most to do. I think
he poetizes. He kind of, he's a weird sort of narrator within the movie almost. We have one long scene of a conversation, sort of, kind of, if we can break this into acts almost, it's kind of between the first and second act as things start to go south, right? He at first seems like a rather kind, funny, harmless uncle, but then it's this kind of awful, sardonic, sort of, maybe even demonic, kind of attitude towards Krisha. That's just so amazing, and again, like first time watching it, it's like, aha, the funny uncle. I know this kind of guy. I think I understand him. But no, I mean, watching it again, you see kind of the storytelling and the sort of dramatic role that he plays.
There's a cruelty to him. He has like almost a gleeful cruelty to him.
Yeah.
And, I don't know, like, again, like she drops that turkey and we hear in the background this, and we're just like, oh my God. It's like the most horrible moment in the movie. And he's just delighted. He's delighted that he's right. Because he told them, like, don't invite Krisha. She's going to mess it up. Don't invite Krisha. And in the one moment, he's proven right. And he's so happy. He's so happy. Absolutely evil. Pure evil. The worst kind of evil.
Would you guys have eaten the turkey?
I thought you could salvage some of it. You could have taken some stuff off that turkey.
The top.
Why didn't you just eat the turkey, man?
That guy was like, and throw away the whole turkey. Because it's ruined Thanksgiving. It's all ruined. Entire turkey.
By the way, if you listeners, transcribers at home, I did say earlier the streak continues, and what I was referencing is that Anthony has never voted yes for a movie Tony is nominated.
I'm not voting yet.
Bring him over. I will say this seems much more justified than other movies, and I'm very curious about Anthony's perspective on this movie and I take it for granted. I took it for granted watching this movie, but it is culture bound. And
same.
So, Anthony, I'm curious how you came to the movie in the sense of how did you view Krisha throughout the film? Bring me into your conceptualization process. When you were introduced to her and throughout the film, like, what did you think of her, and were you empathizing with her, or were you kind of seeing kind of the insanity as the most present thing in her character? Or, go ahead.
I think, well, one, you have to start with the idea of Thanksgiving itself, which is something that was less common growing up in like my own household, which was not a thing necessarily like it is for a lot of families of these big get-togethers. That was kind of an unusual thing growing up, and it did happen, but not like as often. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing, I always have to think about. But two, I think the family itself in the film, and I can only compare it to my own family and my own extended family, which, in some reason you might say falls into a sort of Latino stereotype of, I'd say, like a more open, more vulnerable. It's less so, I feel like everything is hidden. And often in my experiences, dynamics are fully out in the open to begin with. And they're fully out in the sense of the woman being led, leading, being in charge, and the kind of dynamics that the uncle having, I never would see in like my own sort of house without it being done in a second. The kind of idea of like the men wrestling and things like that happening, I'm just unfamiliar with, because in any sort of larger family gathering, a woman or whatever would come out instantly and we'd be silent type thing. It's like these little small moments like I hear about in families, but in my own circumstances, like just not how I remember like my own get-togethers. And so like
I want to be clear though, real quick. My family does not have a pack of daddy's large boys. I don't have that. I just think they're fun.
Yeah. And an uncle talking about killing a dog.
And I don't have him either.
Yeah.
But I think that is interesting. Like my family, for instance, I can see a lot of compensatory defense mechanisms, right? A lot of deflection, a lot of kind of trivialization, niceties, and beat a dead horse, but just this banality. But and then there's so much repression. There's all these family secrets that we don't talk about. I, for one, I have a mental illness that is not discussed at extended family gatherings. It is taboo. And so there are certain subjects like Krisha is experiencing, if I can try to empathize and over-identify with her for a second, she is experiencing a duality here when she's coming into this environment. She has to present herself, her recovered, convalesced self, and she has to hide the chaos, the entropic self, and the self-destructive self, right?
Mm-hmm.
So she has to present one side and hide the other, and that leads to a disconnect and feelings of tension, internal tension and anxiety. And so she, ultimately, I think that's what happens, is that anxiety manifests itself when she, as well as other things. The son is probably the ultimate trigger for that. But I see that repression that is so common in, I think, a lot of American households, and we don't necessarily know how to talk about emotions. We don't know how to process emotions in America very well. We would rather talk about sports. We would rather talk about these trivial matters and focus less on how we relate to each other and how we can improve those interactions, because they're painful and they make us vulnerable. So I think I saw a lot of that in this movie.
Yeah, one thing I could admire is, I think everybody could relate to this, regardless of a sort of cultural boundary, of the idea of wanting to deal with things on your own, regardless of how social, regardless of how well of a family or bad of a family you have. But the idea of, if you have something wrong, you want to first and foremost take care of it on your own. And I think what's interesting is the way that, Tony talked about Krisha's tragic flaw of wanting to cut corners and stuff is also something bound by, her age. That she is like an older person, which is a side of a story we normally don't see outside of maybe, I was thinking of Connor's, I'm sure everybody talks about this in the reviews of the movie, A Woman Under the Influence. Yeah, she's younger there, but here, she's an older woman. Like, in a certain sense, there's not a ton of time left. In these sort of stories, we're used to sort of, I feel like, a late 20, 30-year-old, 40-year-old woman able to like completely change her life and, have whole things left. But for Krisha, how much time is honestly there? Her son is, older, almost out of college, right? Or about to be.
Maybe finishing like masters or something. Who knows? Yeah.
I don't think she knows either.
Yeah.
I don't know what he's studying. It's like, you're doing some business money bullshit, right?
Yeah. What if I love business management?
I like that's another aspect, and maybe it's more trivial, but like, because it has to do with things outside of the movie. But I do appreciate also the fact that, like, how many movies do you see that are about 60-year-old women? Like, that's never, you never see that. Like never, like, not even in like indie movies, not in like maybe occasionally you'll see, I think there was a movie like called Gloria Bell last year, but it's very like unusual. And I think
is that,
really
Tony?
cool that
Think about it. Think about why that is. Because in our society, we expect people of that age to have already finished developing in every sense of the word and to be in decline, right? And that speaks to ageist practices, whatever. I mean, it's all societal in that sense. We want to watch somebody who has potential. And that's what we feel, the tragedy. We feel the lost potential in Krisha. Even if there is still potential, we're forced to focus on this Derridean ontological, lost potential, right? How would you say his name as an adjective?
Deridian.
Yeah, I added an extra R, excuse me. But
that was in many ways more Derrida than.
There you go. Yeah, it was the ultimate. Yeah, it was the superlative. But I think we're meant to see the ghosts of her past or the missed potential in the room with us. Yeah. And that's kind of exposed when she's watching those home videos while she's drunk.
Yeah.
And she's almost transported there. And she's like, had I made one or another decision, I could still be part, you really feel this sense that she feels that she fucked up her life, whether or not that's true. And I think it's unfair for us to pass judgment on her and say she ruined her life. It's okay for us to feel that she feels that she ruined her life and that she knows everybody else thinks that she's a failure.
Well, so at the end, I'm sorry, Kirk. I didn't mean to jump on.
No, I'm done. I already fucked up one name tonight. Go ahead.
You already ruined your life. May as well, get drunk and no. But that's the thing, is at the end of the movie,
we're your family, Kirk.
What's so bleak about that ending is when she takes the bottle of vodka and starts snorting the inside of those pills. She has that conversation with her sister towards the end, which, by the way, one of the realest, most painful scenes I've ever seen. It's just so painful.
They're sisters in real life too.
You can feel that family history and that bond.
Yeah.
But what's so tragic about when she's given that off ramp and she doesn't take it is that she has decided, no, I have fucked up my life. redemption is impossible. I may as well just take the pills. I may as well just drink. I may as well just make everyone else as miserable as I am, which is tremendously, it's horrible, but it's also like a real thing. People do that every day. But I mean, Anthony, to not push back, because it's your subjective experience. I can't push back on that, right? But I think that, like, while some of these things are cultural, like, don't you think that there is something kind of universal about the idea of regret, the idea that I've missed my chance, I've ruined my life, you know, wanting to make people love you who can't love you? And did you see any of those things? Did those things resonate with you at all, or did you feel something in those elements of the movie?
I think I felt him, as Kirk did a very good job of explaining, in the way that Krisha's character was dealt with. I think at the end of the day, like you're saying, the most universal experience there is the idea of there was a specific point in time that you feel forever bound to, in which you could have changed things and you could have went in a different direction. That's why my favorite part of this movie actually is when, I think it's the uncle, when he tells her, you still act like you're like a college student or something, which is usually the cultural, American cultural form of how we're used to dealing with this type of person. And in a movie, it's usually a young, attractive, woman, or a young, attractive man, actually, usually white for that matter. But, I think in this particular case, I could relate to her struggles, and in particular, the idea of wanting to deal with things on her own and the fear of being on her own. And actually, I changed my mind. The part I really love, and the one part that really resonated with me in the way that it seemed to work for the rest of you guys, is when she's on the phone and she's saying, like, how every time I call, no one's ever there for me, which is the idea of reaching out. And when you finally get ready to reach out, no one's ready to hear your call. So I think that in itself is the moment that's, culturally transcending itself. Now, I could love those moments, but I think as a whole, if I isolate them, it kind of works for me. When I think about the family and relation, there's a bit of work I have to do that in some ways loses the rest of the movie for me.
And just this idea, right? I mean, the reason she couldn't be there for her son, the reason why she had to, I mean, this was just a culturally, she thought may have been a culturally acceptable way of justifying her actions, which is that she was avoiding this very situation, right? That she stayed away because she feared that she could do damage, right? If she came back, she wouldn't be able to handle the pressure, that she wouldn't be able to fully be there for her son, right? And that this kind of exact thing that happens would happen. And that's this just horrible, gut-wrenching dilemma of which there are just so many in life, that it's kind of sad to think about, but horribly, horribly true, Enough said.
Yeah.
I sip my wine.
Exactly. He was
drinking glass of wine.
He's a hypocrite, guys. Don't listen to Con.
He's also snorting
some pills.
Mysterious pills.
That was Adderall, by the way.
I wish I had led with this, but there's some interesting context to this movie where apparently this is semi-autobiographical in that there are people in his family. I guess his cousin, who was in her late 30s, and his father, who was in his early 60s, both died from either alcohol or drug use, but they were both addicts and they both died relatively young. And this movie was made not that long afterwards, I believe. And that's part of why he has so many of his family in the movie. That to me is kind of nuts. That's kind of crazy that you would go to your family and say, remember this horrible tragedy we're still recovering for the rest of our lives? I want to make a movie about it, and I want you to be in it.
I think that's brilliant.
I mean, it's amazing. It makes amazing art, but
no, I think it could serve as the greatest form of therapy there is in catharsis. Yeah. This movie could offer so many benefits for practitioners, especially those working with families, about the family life cycle and how we look at our systems interacting. And so, anyways, I'll shut up now.
And I actually had a question for you guys. There's one aspect of this movie that I am sort of ambivalent about that it kind of makes me uncomfortable, is the character of Gigi, the grandmother in her her 90s who has dementia, who is the Trey Edward Shults is real, either grandmother or great grandmother, but she actually has dementia. She's just an old woman that they put in front of the camera and started filming and started talking to. I mean, I think her character is handled with as much sensitivity as you could handle a character like that. But something kind of bothers me about using an actual demented old woman for this in your movie. I don't know. Did that bother you guys at all, or did you not really think that? Did you understand kind of the intent behind it?
I thought it was all makeup. I thought it was like Dustin Hoffman, Little Big Man.
No.
I had no such. No, of course I didn't. Yeah, it's hard to weigh in when you put it that way, Tony. Definitely, I guess I was so swept up in the film, but obviously it's real family dynamics and it's real things that she's saying. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's. I find it extremely poignant. I don't find it necessarily offensive or off-putting necessarily. Yeah, I mean, I think she was very important. I mean, and again, we're using her as a bit of a prop here, but she was very important. I think sort of just in the pure kind of cinematic storytelling. For instance, when we see her in this kind of montage at the end, along with the baby, Krisha is kind of having a crisis of realizing, how far her life has gone, that eventually she'll be old like her mother, right? I think she was really important to have there, to have this multi-generational perspective. Yeah. And just so many important moments of Krisha trying to, she gets all dressed up just to meet her mother. It shows this horrible fragility and this need to be loved. And, I thought just the payoff was so great. I guess, it's a rather instrumental way of looking at a real person, but
I first of all, are we sure that she wasn't like cogent? We know that she was wheeled in from the home and like she thought it was 1983.
I listened to an NPR interview and I don't know if he said that explicitly, but like I think that was the implication.
Oh boy. Okay. Well, yeah, I mean that's a little dicey. If he said like she might have agreed to be in a movie, and I don't think she looked poor in the movie. Like she looked fine,
Right.
She didn't look too mentally deteriorated, but at least she seemed like most older people that I've been around. But I thought what she's allowed us to see is this intergenerational process of how we handle conflict or how we express, it's actually more is hidden than is shown really of her relationship with Krisha. But I love how in the background you can see Trey looking on at his mother interacting with her mother, and you can see kind of how these dynamics are transmitted between generations. And I thought that was so poignant, and so well shot and framed, and that it's just another part of this 80 minutes that just hit is a little bit of a gut punch, almost kind of a really too real moment. But I enjoyed that.
An additional layer of poignancy to her character too is that she's the one person who can forgive her, who can want her around, is a person who can't remember what she's done. There's something very brutal about that, I think. Do you guys want to move on to the voting, or are there other? Okay.
Kirk's nodding his head.
Sure. Oh, one other fun fact. I should have had a nice section at the beginning where I got all this kind of stuff. Like Trey Edward Shults' background, he worked with Terrence Malick on a couple of his movies, like 3 of his movies up to this point. That was like his background. So I think that's kind of cool because you can definitely see like that influence and kind of that expressionistic kind of
the imagery montage. Yeah.
Yeah. The opening and ending, especially.
Yeah. Yeah. But anyway, so I've talked your ears off about this film, and I think we're ready to go to a vote. Why don't we start with Kirk first?
Yeah, no, I'll just short and sweet. Yes, I recommend that you watch this film if you haven't. If you can relate to it, I think there's quite a treat, and there's a lot there for you, and even subsequent viewings, it's rewatchable in my opinion. But
definitely,
that's a yes.
Connor?
Yeah, I mean, the second watching has really solidified it as, I think, one of the best movies we've watched for the 706, I would say. It's really, I just have so much admiration, and just emotional involvement, with this movie. I say, of course, it's a yes. Maybe it's the wine talking. I don't know.
Connor never even saw the movie. Yeah, one thing I'm actually really surprised at is how you two or all 3 of you are saying how rewatchable the movie is. Because I was thinking it's like a very emotionally taxing movie.
Harrowing, yes.
Yeah, it's like it's actually amazing to me that you guys say that. And on the flip side, I was thinking it's like if you replace the main actress with Meryl Streep and the uncle with like William Macy, that this could be like the most Oscar baity movie, like for those 2 actors. Like it's gonna happen. It's like a Hollywood version in like a few years.
This is the filmmaker. Sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut off.
No, you go.
No, I was saying like the directing is nothing like a middle-brow prestige picture.
Yeah. Oh, it'd be Tom Hooper from The King's Speech who remakes it.
There you go.
But I would have said no, but I think Kirk brought out the D word, and I'm gonna give it like a yes with an asterisk. Not because it worked for me, but because I see it works for a lot of people out there, and it could work for a lot of people out there. I was thinking in the background, Deridian.
Oh.
But I was thinking of like, people I know and people who they know who are dealing with or have a background of people dealing with like the opiate crisis and things like that. Like,
Yep.
There's so much out there. So I think, for that reason, I'll give it a yes with an asterisk.
This is the first movie in our entire 16-year run that I've pitched that Anthony has said yes to. So,
wow.
A movie he didn't even like. So give it a round of
Change is possible, guys. Healing and change.
Yeah,
Relationships can be fixed.
You could send my dog
Hope
back
is
now,
not
please.
lost.
He likes it here. Him and George are getting along great. All right, guys, we'll move on to our next segment here, in which these three will pitch movies for us to watch next week. So I think, was it Connor who went the furthest back?
Yes, I choose Anthony to go first.
All right. I'm going to keep with this theme of, as Kirk was saying, of working with some movies. And I've been really in a mood of revisiting certain books, certain movies, and seeing if anything has changed, whether they've grown on me, whether they've gotten worse and things like that. And so I'm going to nominate something I know Tony has seen. And I remember back in our dorm, I did not like. I don't know if Kirk or Connor have seen it, but it's a big one. It's 2012's Cloud Atlas from the Wachowski siblings and Tom Tykwer, who never gets mentioned. But I'm curious about revisiting this, so to throw that out there.
I love Cloud Atlas. I love it. It's one of my favorite movies.
Yeah. And until that other one. What was the Channing Tatum that we saw?
Jupiter Ascending. Yeah, that one.
Jupiter Ascending.
Yeah, it's the greatest film of all time.
Say Kirk goes next. Sorry, Kirk. You already got the idea.
We don't have a snowball's chance in hell. I nominate Law and Order SVU season 6, episode 9. It's a really good one. No, let me see. I don't know.
Pick a movie. What do you mean?
We've seen all the movies Kirk has seen.
Tony, you tell me that you cry every time you see that movie. How am I supposed to?
Just pick one. You don't know what I'm gonna do. Just pick a movie. Come on.
All right, I'm being salty, but let me just find the name of it.
I have other favorite movies. You can pitch Boogie Nights or something. I mean,
you'd have to pick a movie that Tony made to get it picked right now.
Just also pick Cloud Atlas.
Here it is. I got it. Sorry, I was blanking on the name, and I had a last-minute change. I am going to pick... Okay, Tony, for those of you who don't know, Tony has recently watched Waco. Now, Waco is a mini-series about the Waco siege, and it stars, among others, Rory Culkin. Now, Rory Culkin also made a film in 2018 that Anthony knows, and he's laughing because he knows what it is. You know what it is, Anthony?
No, what is it?
Oh, it's Lords of Chaos, the Norwegian death metal movie, black metal movie about Euronymous, and we have all those other dudes.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's okay. Here's
Sky Ferreira.
Is this Rob Zombie?
With Sky Ferreira.
I think it's produced by Rob Zombie. It's directed by Jonas Åkerlund.
Oh, okay.
But yes, Rory Culkin plays famous black metal Euronymous, and then we have a bunch of other misfits characters. But basically, if you don't know about black metal, it's fucking heavy. Like Norwegian black metal, they burn churches. There's a whole
they kill
thing
people.
there.
It's pretty intense.
Yeah. It's gross. Like, I'll say this up front. The movie is gross, but it's somehow endearing, ? And it's provocative. And I think any movie that kind of tries to, here's my Hollywood producer shtick, tries to move the paradigm, right? We want to move the paradigm. I think it accomplishes that in a certain way in like what can be shown in a movie in terms of like just physical violence, in a way kind of similar to Green Room. almost. So, and I want to see if you guys get anything out of it. So it'd be interesting.
As for me, I'm going to recommend 1944's Double Indemnity. This is one I've watched a couple times. It's not necessarily a pure, Connor movie. I like it very much. I think it's a movie that just, as I've looked back on the movies that I've watched, movies I have on my list, as I go back, I think it's a movie that just kind of just projects above and beyond, far beyond the rest in terms of just the incredible craft, the incredible construction, the writing, the acting. It's just a movie that just represents just sort of a pinnacle of Hollywood, of kind of golden age Hollywood filmmaking. And it's a great story. It's engrossing. It's a fascinating movie. I just think it's, I would definitely love to watch it with you guys as well. I don't know if anyone has seen it.
I saw it years ago.
It's an Anthony film.
It's an Anthony film? Cool.
Yeah, I love it.
Okay. These are some very good and very interesting choices. I'd like to hear some rebuttals. Just rebuttal. Do what you gotta
sure.
do.
Have you and Connor seen it, Kirk? Cloud Atlas?
No, I have not.
Okay. I haven't either. Shit. I mean, I saw it and hated it. And I think it's the worst movie ever. No, I haven't seen it. Fuck.
Okay.
Oh, that makes it more appealing.
It is a long movie.
It's 3 hours. It's 3 hours.
It's an interesting one. I mean, I'm curious because I know on my first take years ago, I was really ambivalent. In fact, I disliked some of it. And I'm ready to see if certain things rework again, which is interesting. I thought you were going to nominate Columbus for a second, the Kogonada film, but I couldn't remember if that was 2018 or not. So Lord of Chaos.
That's a really good movie.
Yeah, it is a great movie. I guess other than what Cachet, we've never quite done a horror movie, even if it's not quite a horror movie. It's more horror drama. I don't know what you call it.
I wouldn't call Cachet a horror movie, but yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean, though? Like, we haven't done something more in the vein of what Kirk is suggesting, which is always fun. And then Connor's movie is just a great classic movie. I'm sure we'd all have some fun talking about it, and Barbara Stanwyck, fantastic in it.
Oh, yeah.
So my pitch is for you two.
Okay. I will say about my choice that it's almost in the vein, and this is a weak ass connection, but like a John Waters like exploitative film in a way that is like very kind of gross. And yeah, I said that already. I'm repeating myself, but if you can kind of sense the vibe that I'm going.
Kirk, I'm a gross guy. It's okay. Lay it out.
It's
he's freaky, Kirk.
You're
What are you being so coy about?
little kind of like, yeah, it's a little offbeat, but Anthony, I'm not a big Ayn Rand fan, so I'm gonna pass on Atlas Shrugged. And Connor, double in, what was that girl's name? Demnity?
A girl named Enmity or something?
Yeah. It sounds like a double trouble. So I'll stay away from that one.
Did you literally pitch a movie called Double Trouble with the Olsen twins once?
Did I?
You pitched Mary-Kate Nash. Yeah, Mary-Kate Nash you pitched.
Did I pitch It Takes Two once?
You did. You absolutely did, yeah.
With what's her name? The Slim Fast woman, Kirstie Alley? Yeah,
I have no idea who's in that.
I don't remember.
The Criterion Channel.
No, that's one of their best. Would you believe it? The twins get mixed up because they're identical. It's kind of funny.
Well, why would you spoil the movie? But okay. Connor, you got to rebut now.
All right, so less of a rebuttal, more of a introspective comment. Kirk's movie really fascinates me. I put it on my list as soon as he mentioned it, which shows I'm a little bit of a freak myself. Like, as soon as he mentioned, I'm like, I got to watch this. Put it on my list. So I really would love to watch it and get it off my list. And as I introspect, I find that, like, Cloud Atlas, it kind of like, just like, yeah. I just remember hearing about it. It didn't seem like my kind of thing. I don't know. It's just, I feel this distance and this almost fear of it. So I don't know. But that's just my introspective opinion. A Double Indemnity, it's about what you'd expect, but I think it might surprise you by its incredible writing and unbelievably skillful direction and all that.
Great. Well, I'll say we've got these are three fantastic choices. I would love to do an episode on all three of these movies, and I hope that we've abolished the informal rule that we can't suggest things again, because I think there's been a lot of great suggestions over the years, and I think all three of these movies will be worth doing episodes on at some point.
None of these have been suggested, have they? Sorry.
What? No, none of them have.
Okay.
None of them have before.
Okay.
I will say, as I said before, Cloud Atlas is one of my favorite movies. It is 3 hours, which isn't disqualifying or anything. Most of Connor's movies are in the 4 or 5 hour range.
True.
HBO miniseries over there.
True.
I really was thinking about it the other day, but I do think we've been skewing a little recent lately, and I would like to bring it back a little bit. And same thing with Lords of Chaos. Lords of Chaos sounds really interesting.
But
Exactly. Gordon Ramsay here.
yeah.
So I would love to talk about Norwegian black metal. That movie sounds really cool, but I think I got to go with Double Indemnity.
Okay.
We want to do it. I want to do an older movie. I want to do like a capital K classic. Something we haven't done in a while. And I watched it a few years.
Maybe not capital K classics. I think we can leave those out. I don't know. I don't know if that's Birth of a Nation or
We could say
Tony,
we could switch my vote for Krisha to a no, because Tony dishonored our backroom deal.
I think that
I'm very surprised.
Yeah.
I watched it years ago, and it didn't stick with me, and I know I need to see it again. I need to just watch it again. I don't know what it was, but it's a very acclaimed, very famous movie, and I would like to do some more like just big ol' popcorn classics, at least from time to time, between the Krishas and the whatever the hell else.
Black metals.
Yeah. All right, guys.
Sure.
Well, I'm looking forward to doing that. Connor, next. I don't know. I guess Connor has to come back as a guest now. I guess he has to come back. Other two, I'm not sure.
I bought myself another week.
He made it on. He's staying on the island. All right, guys. Well, thanks as always for joining us, and we'll see you soon with Double Indemnity.
Thanks, everybody.
I'll have what she's having.
Like a lot of think pieces, and I think I agree with this guy who's like, yeah, J.K. Rowling is not a great author. And you know what I mean? Like, she is, but she isn't. Like, she created this thing that's amazing.
Yeah.
And she did a decent job of it. But as far as like a mechanic, like the mechanics of an author, or like what a writer is supposed to do, she kind of fails at sometimes.
In terms of her like prose and like stuff like world building, there's nothing about it that's like above and beyond a lot of other stuff.
It's just like standard like wish fulfillment.
Fantasy.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I would say it's pretty, she captured something. It's a very unique take on fantasy that, has an element of wish fulfillment, but also of like reality of the boarding school and kind of being young and going to a new school and all that kind of stuff. And I don't know. I thought it was.
I compare it to George Lucas. Like, she had a great idea, and she deserves a lot of credit for making this amazing thing that spun captured so many people's imaginations. But George Lucas is not like a great filmmaker or a great writer necessarily. He's more of the idea.
Sure,
that's an apt comparison.
But the thing is like, I feel like Rowling, though, like, I mean, it's like different mediums, of course, but Rowling in the initial books, like, her writing is actually pretty good. Where she falters, I think, is like the action and sort of like the momentum scenes, but like the day-to-day existence of like the school, like Connor was saying, or like the banality of like being a teenager or a young adult is like pretty well captured. There were like whole like lines and like paragraphs I could like remember from like, and I haven't touched those books in years.
Yeah, but like as far as literary critics, I mean, what do you think about a children's book that's 800 fucking pages? Like, doesn't that kind of go against like? Yeah. I don't know.
A lot of kids.
I don't know. For a certain age of kids, I think that's good to get them to read like, reading longer stories, reading longer, volumes. I think that could be
time.
It's like a gateway to like more complicated stuff. Yeah.
I wouldn't put it up there with like the best of children's literature, maybe.
Right.
Like,
no.
Lewis Carroll or even J.R. Tolkien, but like I think it's, for what it is, it's a very good like children's book.
Yeah. Well,
I don't know.
Maybe it's too hot. I got cake in the freezer.
Yeah.
Too hot.
But
Okay, this is a safe space to try out all your takes.
undeniable.
Before we
that
try the
Tony's
takes
secretly
before we get
recording.
adult fiction is
I mean,
great.
it is
Yeah.
recording.
Yeah.
We've got a
Yeah.
nice bonus bit. Anyway,
my
let's
hope
probably
was-
start, huh, guys?
My hope was though that real quick is like Tony was actually a huge like Detective Strike fan or whatever her detective novels are.
Oh,
Yeah.
the casual vacancy.
No, she has the
Mm.
series though. She
Whoa,
writes under a
the series?
pseudonym.
I
Oh,
totally
yeah.
forgot about that.
Yeah. There's like 4 or 5 books.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways,
all right, you guys
So-
ready to start?
I am.
All right, guys, welcome to Where We Go One, We Go All, the official. Okay, so I'm kidding. That's not the real intro.